All right, perfect. Great. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started. Thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. It looks like we've hit critical mass here. So we'll go ahead and get this event started. So good evening and welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us for our third virtual meetup hosted by the sales engineers in New York. My name is Eric Lick. I'm one of the co-founders here at SENY by night and part of the SE leadership team at Slack during the day. We have a great event for you all tonight. We're going to talk about the role of the pre-sales chief of staff, and we're going to dive into the world of pre-sales operations. As companies start to grow their sales and SE teams, this becomes a critical role to help companies scale fast, scale smart, and scale successfully. And we're super lucky to be joined by three of the industry's best and brightest who will be here representing some of the top tech companies in the world, from VMware, Okta, and Splunk. So before we get into the content, quick agenda. So we're going to do a couple of announcements real quick. Then we're going to jump into about 45 minutes of content. And at the end of the night, we're going to go ahead and we're going to raffle off a couple prizes to everyone that joined today. But first, we just want to send out a sincere thank you to everyone who's joined and all of the SENY members. This is our third virtual meetup. And to be honest, we didn't know what to expect when we moved from these physical meetups to virtual. And we've been just blown away by the support, the engagement, and the camaraderie of the community. So we want to just simply say, thank you all for putting so much into this group. It's one of those things that, and I know we feel it too as part of the co-founding group, that you really get out of it what you put into it. And we see so many members put so much into this, and hopefully you guys are getting out as much as we are. We now have about 650 members in our meetup group, and over 300 people in our Slack workspace that are engaging every week. So really incredible just to see the growth. So again, just thank you guys all so much. And this month, June, is actually extra special. So SENY started June 2018. And so we're celebrating our 2 years since the launch of this. And so to celebrate, thanks to our founder, Akshat, he put together a really good video that went live today. And this video is a bunch of folks from this group and this community who are talking about what SENY means to them and what they've gotten out of it over the past few years. And so I encourage everyone to go out. It's live on our website. It's live on LinkedIn. Thanks to one of our panelists, Marjorie, for sharing it with her network. It's already starting to catch some fire over the social media. And we've seen this group really grow. So it started as sales engineers in New York. We welcomed in Boston and Toronto recently. And now we have a really exciting announcement. We're actually traveling south into our nation's capital. So tonight we want to formally announce the launch of Sales Engineers of DC. So congratulations and thank you so much to Henry, to Melissa, and to Katan for really championing this and doing such a great job to set it up. We're really excited to see all of the pre-sales folks in our nation's capital start to come together, and really excited to see their next event once they get that scheduled. So go ahead, check them out on LinkedIn, and they're also in our SENY group in the channel SEDC. So tonight we're going to be raffling off a couple of items. So thanks to our sponsor, Vivint, we're going to be raffling off 3 Sonos One speakers. So first, if you're not in our Slack workspace, definitely head there. You can sign up if you're not already signed up through our website, salesengineersny.com. And from there, you can go ahead and join our Slack workspace. And we have a specific channel, June 23 webinar, where there's going to be some engagement and people talking as we go through tonight's event. So 3 winners, 3 people will walk away from tonight's event with a Sonos speaker. I personally have them all over my house and really just enjoy it. Now we mostly hear Disney because our kids are just really into that and take over the speakers. So we've already lost control to a 4- and 2-year-old, but I do commandeer these every once in a while and get some of my music on there, but they're just fantastic. So we're excited to give away 3 of these. The first one's going to be raffled off to the person who asked the best question in the Slack workspace. So that's the question that gets the most likes, the most thumbs up. And so some of the co-founders will be monitoring that channel so that we can give that one out. Then we're going to have Akshat spin his wheel, and we're going to have 2 lucky random draws for folks that will walk away with the last 2. We'll also be handing out some of these really nice and very comfortable SENY t-shirts. So again, Akshat and the crew will be monitoring the Slack channel. So the question that gets the most likes or thumbs up, that person will get a t-shirt, as well as any comment. This could be a thought, an observation that gets the most engagement and the most likes on there. And again, as you saw on the agenda, we're gonna kick off the raffle at about 6:30, 6:45. So hopefully we'll be wrapping up shortly thereafter. And again, we wanna send a special shout out to our sponsor, Vivin. So Vivin and their co-founder and CEO, Matt, were super gracious to help support the SENY community in the event tonight. So a little bit about Vivin if you haven't heard about them. So Vivin has created the world's first software platform for pre-sales. So it's meant to help B2B technology companies transform their go-to-market motion. Their product, Hero by Vivin, unlocks the strategic potential of pre-sales with sophisticated tools to keep product and sales aligned, improve product market fit, increase forecast accuracy, and very relevant for our topic tonight, help scale team operations with efficiency. So once again, thanks again, Matt, for being such a supporter of the SENY community. And if anyone wants to learn more, feel free to go out to vivin.com or reach out to Matt specifically. And so with that, let's go ahead and jump into the content. So I'd like to welcome our panelists for tonight. And here they are coming online. Perfect. So thank you guys so much for joining. Really appreciate it. To kick off tonight, we'll just go around and let everyone know who you guys are and what you guys do. So maybe we'll kick it off. Marjorie, if you wouldn't mind just giving a brief introduction for all the folks out there.
Sure. So really sad that we're not doing this in person. You know, I miss the in-person events for sure, and definitely looking forward to our next connection. But as Eric mentioned, my name is Marjorie Abdelkrim. Today, I changed roles about 2.5 months ago. So I'm in a new role. I lead the Cloud Technical Services team for VMware. But prior to that, I spent 2 years in the Chief of Staff role at VMware for the Americas SE organization. But prior to that, my career actually started in technical support and wound my way somehow and stumbled into pre-sales, as many of you have as well. And I've been having a ton of fun. But you know, the point of my personal career journey, and as I've talked to many of you about this in the past, there's no one direct path, right? There's so many different paths to getting to different roles, and it's all about what you aspire to do and how you want to move into that next part of your journey, of your life, and it's about making the most of it. So have fun while you're at it. Looking forward to the conversation today.
All right, and Teresa, how about you?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for that, Marjorie, because I had a similar situation. I pivoted as well. So I love the aspect of you can pivot and change at any point. So thank you for saying that. So I'm Teresa Bell McLean. I actually have a dual role here at Splunk. I look at things from a change management perspective. I'm change management director, but I also serve as chief of staff for our vice president of sales engineering for the global SE organization. So my career actually began in marketing and operations for several years, and then I pivoted in 2010 to expand that into organizational change and building change and executing change programs and measuring change programs globally. And then I kind of shifted over to, you know, continue the change management, but then also bridge the gap with the operations component as well.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Teresa. And we had who you mentioned, Peter, on the last virtual event, and it was a big hit. So we appreciate all the support from Splunk. We also have a couple of Splunkers. I'm not sure if you guys call yourself that, but Splunkers who are starting up the group down in DC. So we really appreciate all the support from the folks over at Splunk. And then last but not least, we have Joe.
Hey guys, Joe Shear, currently pre-sales chief of staff, pre-sales operations programs leader at Okta. Prior to that, spent a good chunk of time at Workday, SAP, and PeopleSoft, off and on doing this type of role when I wasn't leading a field team. Excited to be here.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. And so just a reminder, we are going to have a couple questions from the attendees tonight. So for all the folks watching, feel free to send those in Slack channel. We also have the Zoom Q&A set up, so feel free to shoot some notes in there and we'll be monitoring that. But I think first to kick us off, what's always interesting is, and Marjorie, you hit it right off the bat, is, you know, how do people get into sales engineering, and even more specifically into this very specific role? So maybe we'll start there. Joe, just curious, how did you get started in the world of pre-sales operations, pre-sales chief of staff, and what made you decide that it was the right fit for you?
Sure. I guess, to go like jump in the Wayback Machine, I'll say before I got in the pre-sales gig, I was in finance actually at PeopleSoft, doing what we would call sales operations today. And from that, gravitated into pre-sales, and from there, I'll say, just kind of swerved into, I was always drawn to doing things that generated leverage for the company, for the organization. How do we get more for less, really? And that's that was kind of my path, and I was blessed with a couple pretty amazing opportunities at great, really quickly growing companies.
Perfect. Teresa, how about you? You had a marketing background. How did you land in the tech world and then this role specifically?
Yeah, it's actually a great story. So I kind of started out a little bit in tech, but on the education side of tech. And that was the marketing and operations piece. And then I made a shift, like I mentioned, in 2010 into the nonprofit world, where I ran a lot of global change programs. And I did that. I needed to change. It was an amazing change. And then to drive change was it just kind of came full circle. I went back and got my MBA with an emphasis on organizational change. And then I decided I wanted to pivot again. And I should say, I've been with Splunk for 5 months. This is my 5th month. And I wasn't expecting to jump back into tech. But when I saw the opportunity about what Splunk was looking to do and how they're looking to pivot, and the size of the organization and how they wanted to implement that change, I really knew that that was something that I wanted to dive into. So it's kind of a happy accident that I ended up going back into the tech space.
I think it's Bob Ross, the famous painter, who coined the term "happy accident."
Yeah.
So I like that pull there. And then Marjorie, how about you?
Wow. Yeah. So how did I end up in a chief of staff role? We talk about pivots and accidents. I'd say a lot of my career was a bunch of stumbling into things. So I started off actually as a consultant, delivering, software implementation, about 15 years ago. And I'd always viewed sales as kind of this other, right? Like I would never go into sales. I'd never want to be one of those people. And our organization decided to make a change. We were changing the direction of what we were going to do with services. And that's how I ended up in the sales organization. Our consulting team pretty much got eliminated and obliterated. So we got pushed into, those that remained, we got pushed into a selling organization. And I remember having a conversation with one of the executives at the time. I was about 25 or 26 years old, and I was really miserable and unhappy. And he's like, this is going to be the best thing that happens to your career. And he was right? So from there, and the reason why I go that far back is because there were several things that had to have happened to have led me to this, right? So one, I'm a very structured, project-oriented individual. I like to see repetitive motions, right? I like to see processes implemented. And then that starts from when I was in consulting. So brought all of that experience into selling. And eventually I moved back into services and decided to, give it another shot. We were rebuilding the services organization. And for those of you that are in the services world and that have to lead, P&Ls and have to deal with bottom line expectations that the company puts on you, it's a tough job. Being a consultant is not easy. And I remember calling an executive that I'd worked with in the past, a mentor of mine. I said, listen, I think I'm done with services. I want to go back into sales. I miss being in front of the customer, positioning things early on. What do you all have going on at VMware? And his whole thing was like, hey, you really like structure. You're really good with projects. I've got this new role that, we didn't have in our previous company that we have at VMware. We're launching it at VMware. I'd like for you to interview for the job. And he's like, just come prepared with a whole bunch of ideas of things that you had wanted to roll out at your previous company that you couldn't do before. I was like, great. So I came with a whole bunch of initiatives that I had wanted to see us implement as an SE team. And I got the role. So it was again, stumbling into it. Someone saying, hey, you should give this a shot. And I had a ton of fun for the past 2 years, but I missed being back in the field, which is why I'm back, in the front selling role with the sellers. It's definitely a different type of organization, and we'll talk a little bit more about, you know, the different projects and initiatives that we did.
Great, thank you guys. You know, one of the questions I'm curious is it's always challenging to describe what a sales engineer is, whether it's, you know, Thanksgiving dinner, just talking with friends and family. So for your particular roles, and this actually was sparked by a conversation I had with Joe when, you know, I was looking at the pre-sales operations world and the chief of staff, and really just I was trying to learn more for myself. And I think Joe put it really well. But, you know, if you were going to describe your role in a nutshell to someone you just met, maybe they're in tech or out of tech, how would you do that? And maybe Joe, if you want to kick us off.
Sure, and hopefully I'll give the same answer that we talked about 4 weeks ago. But I guess, you know, I'd say first and foremost, you know, obviously the primary function, the way I look at it is how do you, you know, you're there to make your pre-sales leader and the pre-sales leadership team more effective. You know, and you know, how do I go about doing that? You know, and I'd say, you know, think about, you know, you're an extra set of eyes and ears, you know, that want to surface the important things to, you know, to your boss, take problems off their plate and make them go away. Also from a standpoint of just, you know, cultivating relationships, understanding how the company works, which is different a lot of times than what's written down in process and procedure, right? It's about knowing who to know, how to actually get work done at the given company that you're at. And then also beyond that, I'll say just, you know, obviously, you know, your boss has a relationship with the leadership team. He sees those folks all the time. There's a whole separate, you know, group of leaders in any pre-sales organization that are not leaders because of role or title, but are leaders because of what they know, what they do, and how they do it. And I'll say that was always like my first target is cultivate relationships with those folks, because that's who's going to make anything that you want to do from an initiative standpoint successful or not successful. They're your change management guys right there. If you want to get something done, you got to win those folks over. So, you know, again, and I'll come back and I'll use this term a lot tonight, is thinking of ways to generate leverage for the organization. How do you make it more successful? Do things once rather than 400 times.
Yeah, it's perfect. You nailed it. You hit the same answer when we talked. And I think the big thing was, you know, for smaller companies, a lot of times that falls on the pre-sales leadership team and also just the SEs who are in the field, and takes them away from maybe some of their core work in terms of just generating revenue and helping build the vision for their customers and prospects. So I thought when you said, you know, finding problems and just removing them, that was a perfect way to sum it up. Teresa, how about you? How do you usually describe this?
Yeah, you know, I love, Joe, that you touched on the change management side, because that's my language. I love it. So I would say if I could describe this, it's a couple different, I think there's a couple of things I want to hit on. One, you know, I look at this as kind of like air traffic control in many ways, you know, when you're driving initiatives and are they on time? Are you using the appropriate resources? You know, are you communicating them? That's the other thing that I think that we don't necessarily hone in on, because it's one thing to drive that change with all the initiatives that you have going at that high level, but are they landing? Are you getting them all the way down to the SE level? Do they understand why they're doing it? What's in it for them? And those kind of messages as well. So I think that really kind of coincides with that. Putting on the organizational change lens, you know, I think that driving that sort of change, it's the how. You really need to get to the how. So I know that, Joe, you kind of mentioned that a little bit, how and why are we doing that really is the second piece of that, instead of just driving all those initiatives. But right now, for example, you know, we're driving 47 different initiatives for the second half of the year. So being able to manage those effectively and efficiently, it's quite an interesting position to be in. It's fun though.
And then Marjorie, you served as the pre-sales chief of staff over at VMware, which is a pretty large organization. I know, maybe the largest out of all the folks that we have here. How did you describe that role?
Yeah, so I learned from a leader early on, if people start questioning what you do and they don't know what you do, then you're in trouble, right? So for me, getting that answer was extremely important to make sure that at VMware, people were very clear on the purpose of my role. And it wasn't just me. I had actually a team of 8 supporting the efforts that we had put forth. So we actually got into a room early on, you know, because we had just started the team 2 years ago. So early on, we got into a room and we said, what do we do? What is our value proposition? What's our mission? And we had just finished this Start With Why training. So we figured, let's define our why. What do we do and what's our why? What's our mission? So we came up with our motto or logo or whatever we want to call it, but it was basically transforming the vision into scalable action while breaking boundaries so that SEs are empowered to drive their customers and partners' success. And we were very intentional about the empowering terminology because we wanted to demonstrate that the organization's function was to bring tools and processes that would take the SE from having to do things on their own and being able to be proactive and go out there and message things to the customer without having to worry about back-end things that in the past they had to worry about. So really having them focus on the customer was a big one. And I love what Joe and Teresa both shared around, you know, transformation and change management. Those were definitely things that we would talk about, but we were very concise. We narrowed it down to that one sentence so that we could easily blurt it out anytime anyone asked us, so what is it that you do again? And that's how I would describe it to folks in the tech industry.
Perfect. And so I know for sales engineers, the metrics and the KPIs that we track to are pretty well defined, right? So, you know, it's your deal engagement, the prospects that you're working with, the revenue that you help generate for the company that you're at. There's also an aspect of it of engaging in some of these initiatives that can create leverage and help the team scale. But for you specifically, I feel like there's even more well-defined outcomes and it's even more metric driven. So my question for you guys is, if you look at some of the key goals and objectives that were defined when you were taking this role, what did those look like at your company?
I can jump in and take that one if you want, if you don't mind. So it's a great question. So there's a couple things. The KPIs that are associated with the initiatives are obviously going to be different for each initiative. I will say, again, I'm going to say this from a change management perspective, it's very messy to try to measure when you start talking about how do you drive change quickly and effectively. What does that look like? What is efficient? Some of the things that are it's narrowed down to, for example, is the communication piece, and that comes up a lot. I'll give you an example. There's a great story. I did a skip a level, and I was talking with a manager, an SE manager, and he had told me that we had, you know, as we talked, Marjorie mentioned, we have the vision, we have the mission, goals, and initiatives, and we try to translate that all the way down the organization. And in the hallway, this is pre-COVID, in the hallway, the SE manager overheard another SE talking to a different SE about, you know, hey, we just had this great meeting. This is what I got out of it. And the SE manager said, this is not anything what I said. You know, it's like a game of telephone. So how do you really translate what you want to translate all the way down? So I think being able to have those feedback loops in place really start to give you those metrics that you need from a communication standpoint. But I will say that measuring the change initiatives can be difficult, except for when you actually take each initiative from a KPI standpoint, a project standpoint. But measuring change is not exactly easy to do.
I can comment. I mean, I 100% agree with you, Teresa, right? The old question of what KPIs are you targeting? And even for the SE role, I think I've had this debate with many of the folks here, you know, what do we even measure SE success on is always an interesting conversation. I agree with Teresa on it has to be based on the different initiatives. So for example, for enablement, which I know that we're going to look to talk about, but for enablement, we had targets, right? So we said, certain group of SEs need to be enabled on a certain percentage of technology, and we need to see progression over a quarter's time, 2 quarters time, whatever the time period was that we created, right? Then we would measure that change over time. So we're very specifically around enablement. For initiatives like we created this closed loop initiative, it was tracking to see how much we were submitting into the feedback process. How are we tracking in terms of closure rate with our product management teams? That was also another KPI that we were measuring and following through and seeing whether or not we were actually hitting the targets and goals that we were establishing. But for the role itself, now that I've moved out of the role, I obviously keep in touch with a lot of the SE leaders that I worked with. And I just had a call recently with someone who, similar to you, Eric, was asking me, hey, what's this role really about? Like, what was it in the back end and the stuff that you wouldn't tell people, the ugly stuff? Tell me what it really is like, because I am thinking about it. And, and I said, so, what did you tell me? What did you see? What was the output of how you saw what I did? And he's like, the enablement, the organization, our ability to establish new processes that we were consistent with. So that was for me the highlight of the job, right? Hearing someone else repeat what I had been repeating every single day, come back to me and say, those were what you impact. That's how you impacted my day-to-day job. And that for me was my personal KPI, was hearing the community come back to me and say, here's how you changed my life. Here's how you made my role so much easier.
Marjorie, always doing good discovery, asking the right questions, turning it around on people. Very impressive. Joe, how about you?
Yeah, I you know, in a similar vein, and I'll go back to, kind of, ultimately the goal of the organization is help the company scale. And, you think about early days of growing a pre-sales organization in hyper growth. One of our biggest pains was, time to value of bringing someone in the door and getting them in front of customers with, a level of consistency and quality that you want to focus on, right? And one of the early initiatives we did was, creating a pre-sales center of excellence, which was really responsible for that enablement experience, right? And we, was lucky, and this was at the time at Workday, the company was very willing to invest significantly in spending to gain leverage on initiatives like that. And that one was purely measured in, okay, it used to take us 9 months to their first major certification where they're ready to stand in front of a customer, and now we're doing that in 4.5 months. It was things like that. And again, always coming back through, with a level of consistency and quality, so that you don't, have that problem of, A's not wanting to work with certain people on the team and so forth.
Yeah, and Joe, just a follow-up there, because I'm curious, how would you guys measure that consistency or quality? Because there's not really a hard metric, right? The revenue could be misleading. Did you guys have something that worked well for you?
So, well, and again, I will say that the certification events, were the gating, things, from a standpoint of, can this person deliver their certification demo on a given topic, effectively, and is it at the level we expect for the organization? And I'll say that was a decent proxy for, are they going to be successful, in a live fire situation.
Got it. Okay, perfect. That makes sense.
You know what? I actually wouldn't mind chiming in if we have a few minutes there. I will say I had this question come up just the other day as far as, you have those metrics that you can measure as far as enablement completion, but when you're talking about things that are, I like to call them the soft measurements, the qualitative measurements. One of the things that I have found to be successful, and this just comes from just going back to that communication standpoint, just because that is really hard to track. I mean, you can track open rates, you can try and track engagement, really trying to track understanding and how they apply that is a qualitative measurement. And so what we do is a lot of times I'll have SE managers say, okay, I want you to deliver a message. And then what I want you to have your team do is I want them to write a narrative back and say, how do they plug into this mission? How do they plug into this vision? And do they really understand what it is that they are contributing to? And then if they don't, you can go back and you can reiterate and fix and change that message.
That's great.
And I think just not to rehash this, but I think one of the things that I did skip over was really developing a sense of what does good look like and having everyone buy into that, and agree. And that's not an easy thing, right? If you have 30 sales engineers in a room and there's probably only 33 opinions, right? So to drive that agreement and consensus on what are we going to say, what's our bar, what does good look like for our company.
And then I'm curious, Joe, how would you actually determine that? Is that based on some of the top performing SEs or some work that's been done?
Yeah, I would say, like, who are the people that are effective, and really being the babysitter, getting a bunch of strong-willed people in a room and trying to generate a consensus, right? And again, that's that was probably the harder part than actually doing anything after that, but getting everyone in agreement on this is the bar.
Got it. That makes sense.
Everyone wants to do it their own way, and take pride of authorship there. So.
Yeah, it's something that's been challenging in the past. I've seen it at Slack. We've recently rolled out a new technology that that records and does a little bit of analytics on top of some of the meetings that happen. And it's been really powerful for us to just share great work, right? We know there's so much good work that happens in the field, but a lot of times that's just between the sales team and the prospect on the other side of the line. So it's been really effective to use that to help us answer that exact question that you posed, which is, what does good look like? What is the baseline that we expect all of our SEs to be at? So I appreciate that. And so I want to go maybe one layer deeper here and talk about a specific project. So, can you guys think back to maybe the first project or one of the key projects that you helped really lead or spearhead at your company once you took over your new role? And maybe Teresa, if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, I can do that. So when I first joined, knowing that Splunk was going to go through a major transition and they were trying to grow from a over $2 billion company to a $5 billion company, and looking to shift to cloud, I recognized that I needed to really take a step back and look at how we were going to make that change, because it was such a huge change. I think it's really easy to dive in and say, okay, enablement, this is what we need to do. Here are the metrics for this. Any other training, here's what we need to do. Here's the metrics for this. And so I really wanted to do was step back and say, okay, what are all the components that we need to make happen in order to drive a successful change this large? And so what I did was I built a framework and I trained our Peter's directs. So it kind of said, okay, here's the framework we're going to operate on. So we're going to be driving this message, this change. So things like, coaching, things like sponsorship, things like enablement, resistance management plans, communication plans, and all of these things come together. And if you don't have all of these, it's really difficult to push all of the initiatives through that we want to push through. So designing that framework was really my baby and my project. And it's in process now. And we're creating a train the trainer model so that the leadership can take that downstream so that managers can continue to train. Because the organization is, I believe, 856 SEs. So when you're trying to move a ship it's that large, it can be challenging.
Great, Joe.
So I can. Oh yeah. So I can comment on. So one of the initiatives, and when you ask me for which one project I am most proud of, it's very difficult because there are so many different initiatives that we launched as a team that really had a ton of impact. But I think we'll talk about one later. The one that I think I want to talk about right now is the one that I actually interviewed with, which was how do we drive more diversity within the SE ranks, which traditionally, if we look at gender specifically, right, I'm not looking at ethnic minorities, but if we look at gender as a classification within the SE orgs, for the most part, I've seen it range from really bad of 1% to really good in the 20 percentile range. And I'm talking about traditional companies, right? So if we look at the types of company that VMware sits amongst, not the startups or SaaS, because that category, I think, has done a much better job in driving diversity. So I interviewed on how do we drive more diversity within the organization. So we did a couple of things. One, the poor thing that happens with companies' ERG programs is that they're great, but they're great for corporations' headquarters. They're not great for folks in the field like you and I, or folks that work remotely that don't live in a location where there's a lot of employees. So we take these programs and we decided we're going to expand them out into the field. So we've created a Women Allies in Sales resource group, which we're looking to extend out into our partner organization. The second thing that we did was also change the way we're interviewing. So now you're starting to see this become much more popular. There's a one in the panel, one in the pool requirement that we had instituted. So we requested that every manager, regardless of level of role, you had to have an individual that was of a diverse background or female specifically in the pool, as well as in your panel, to ensure that we were driving some diversity in both representation of who was interviewing and who was being interviewed. And then finally, we're now rolling out this program, as a result of all of the success that we've had with the Women Allies in Sales. We're actually rolling this out to other groups, and we're creating what we're calling an interpod. Here we call pods Power of Difference. So we're leveraging the framework that we created there. We created some career development mentorship programs as a result of that. And we're going to expand it to the other groups so that we can, again, bring those ERGs from corporate headquarters back into the field so that we've got folks feeling connected to what's going on at HQ as well as in the field.
Yeah, for me, Eric, I would say, one of the early initiatives that I tackled was really around new product introduction process. and just kind of defining, again, as product rolls out of the factory, how do we consume it as a pre-sales organization? How do we do enablement? How do we get ourselves prepared to to help our customers on their buying journey? And it really came down to, as we looked at it over time, it's like, how different is the product from what you currently sell, and how different is the audience that you're selling it into, right? So if the answer to those two questions is not much, then it vastly simplifies things. You would create subject matter experts in the various regional teams and do some product enablement and product training and positioning and so forth, and roll that out. If the answer is it's much different, we tended to create incubation teams. We would hire experts off the street that were domain experts in that area, a handful of them, 4, 5, or 6, and then go out and figure out, again, how do we sell this thing? How do we be effective at that, and establish what good looks like, and then over a period of time, again, typically 12 to 18 months, we would roll that back into the regional teams and kind of deprecate that specialist overlay function typically.
Right, so time for Q&A. We have a very engaging audience here. Thank you for everyone asking questions. And the way I'm going to pose questions is the number of likes on those questions. So the first question is by Raj Gunja with 5 likes. For a growing organization, how do you build a business case to create this dedicated role? And any one person can answer.
You know what? I'll jump in and answer that. I think the business case really needs to be around what happens if you cannot execute all of the initiatives that you're looking to do on time, on budget. I would look at it from a numbers perspective. And if you have this role in place, what's the cost of this role versus what's the benefit and what's the return on investment? I think that would probably be how I would do it from a very high level.
Yeah, and I would second that. I would say, again, things like time to value, and then ultimately, like that overall support ratio. When we were able to, provably change the amount of people that it took to support a growing sales force through the enablement efforts and support functions that the operations and chief of staff team built.
Thank you. With the most likes on the question is Jivan Panjikar, and his question is, how do you plan your pre-sales org when your company grows and have to deal with new verticals and new geographies? This question has the most likes, 6 likes. So for a growing organization, build a business case to create this dedicated role.
So did you want us to answer the second question, the capacity planning question, or?
That was a repeat. I messed up. How do you plan your?
I'm like, wait, what?
How do you plan your pre-sales org when your company grows and have to deal with new verticals and geographies?
Yeah. So we at VMware deal with a lot of acquisitions. So we deal with this question quite often. We don't do it necessarily around verticals, but definitely around new product sets. And we created this product lifecycle, which helped us define products from emerging to well-established, right? And what we decided to do is we assigned to that an assumed quota target that we thought that an individual SE should be able to execute on based on level of effort, right? Depending again on where that product sat in the life cycle of product development and product maturity. So for example, for us, vSphere, our most mature product, right, our mainstay solution, that most folks call it the shopping cart product. Companies go around and they put it in the shopping cart. That should not require that much effort to sell, which means you spend less time positioning that to your customer, which means that you could sell a lot of it. You could have a big quota and spend minimal effort. Whereas a new solution, like some of our security products that we've just recently acquired, or some of our, our modern application solutions, that requires a lot more effort because it's still a new emerging solution. It requires you to sell more. So we established some type of calculation method to define, here's how much time it's going to take for you to sell a new product, a standardized product, and from there you can define the capacity of what you would need from an SE's perspective and an SE's time. And keep in mind that we have overlays as well, so specialist teams that support our front core sellers. So you also have to factor in the percent of time that you would use from a core seller versus a specialist seller. So it becomes this math equation. A lot of folks don't like that we use the math because they want us to be more art and less science. But we've noticed and realized that when we put some more math behind it, that our numbers actually are able to substantiate pretty well. It's just a matter of tweaking it whenever we have, for example, accounts like in the New York metro area, right? You've got some really high touch financial customers that want higher engagement. You need to factor that into your equation as well to make sure that you're tweaking your model overall.
Perfect. So I jumped into the Slack channel real quick while you guys were answering that, and there's a ton of engagement. So thank you guys so much for all the questions and comments that are happening there. One thing that I noticed as I was just scanning through is there's a lot of comments and questions around enablement. And I think maybe now's a good time to touch on that. So one, I'm curious, does enablement fall under your purview, or do you have an enablement partner? And then two, just more broadly speaking, how do you think about enabling SEs within your organization?
I can take that. So no, that's a great question. And so we actually are very fortunate to have a team of people who work you know, on enablement, and as far as, you know, building the programs for the rest of the year, where we need to go, so on and so forth. I think, you know, knowing what I know, being here for the last 5 months, and just knowing from a change perspective, one of the number one things that keeps change from driving forward is this idea of resistance. And resistance really comes from anybody who is looking at the initiatives that they have to take on, either from I don't know how to do it, or I don't know why I'm doing it. And this is where enablement really fits in. And this piece is really crucial, because you cannot drive any change forward without having the proper training and having the proper enablement. But at the same time, and somebody had mentioned this earlier, it was the buy-in, and it was the, I think Joe, you had mentioned it, we call this locus of control, in the sense that it has to, the SE has to be in the position where they recognize that's what they need to move forward to, and that's their pathway. So, you know, I think one, it's important for driving change, but two, how do you get that adoption level up, and how do you make that crucial, and a crucial aspect to the organization? I would really say that having the SEs understand where they fit in that enablement and why it's important and what's in it for them and why they're doing it, as well as tracking that process is really, really crucial to the initiative that you're pushing. But enablement is absolutely a crucial part. When I talked about the change framework, it's on its own. It's very important.
Yeah, so I think for us, the SE's input definitely is a big factor of it. But we also, because again, we have a fairly large portfolio, we have to be very prescriptive on what we want folks to get trained on, right? Having everyone get excited about the new shiny toy wouldn't work for us, because then everyone would want to train on security or modern apps versus focusing on some of the more traditional solutions. So we created a program we called Right For Me. And this is actually one of the other projects that I'm super proud of. And really the Right For Me program was meant to focus on the business as well as the SE need, right? So let's say, for example, here in the New York region, we have SEs that are, you know, their core competencies either in networking or in data center, but now we have a gap in storage, right? So again, going through the VMware portfolio. So we decided, you know what, then you need to, as an SE leader, frontline leader, you need to identify the gaps that you have. And then those individuals that don't have a core competency in one specific area or a desire in one specific area, you kind of coach them to go down the path of storage. That's one aspect of it. Then we developed, on top of that, a product discipline. So every SE within a team is assigned to something that we call a product discipline. And you as an SE, you get some additional, you know, celebration for being part of that product discipline. You get to spearhead, you know, initiatives in your region to drive more awareness on that given solution. So it's kind of a specialist within the core organization. Again, remember, we've got specialists and core team members. And then on top of that, right, we talk a lot about enablement, but we always forget about how do we maintain that knowledge. And that's always the biggest concern from SEs is, great, you've assigned me this product discipline, but no one in our region cares about X. How do I make sure that I maintain my knowledge? So we created a point system through a tool that we developed so that we could track activities that SE did, both within their region and outside of their region, so they can maintain a level of certification going forward that would allow that SE to maintain that competency going, throughout their journey of this specific PD. And then we also gave the SEs the option of, after the year was over, the manager could shuffle things up and reassign new PDs, again, to keep folks engaged and learning new things. Super complex, but it's because VMware's got a really complex portfolio. We have 15 BUs, business units, and in those BUs, some of them have one product, some of them have 6 products. So you can imagine the complexity for a core SE trying to learn all of that and being able to talk to those products with confidence with their customer. It required for us to really think about enablement in a very structured fashion and put some more kind of direction from a management layer versus having each SE kind of self-direct what they wanted to go after.
I think the only thing I would add to that, Eric, is just the question about organizational structure. And I'll just say my strong preference is, if you can do it, own it in the pre-sales organization. I've worked with it both ways, having a central kind of all sales enablement organization, as well as owning the enablement organization at Workday. And it absolutely, if you can be for SEs by SEs, it's the optimum. It also will hopefully help you get over some potential comp issues if you have a separate organization sitting off on the side. And they're like, it keeps you from putting your best and brightest people into a role like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know we talk a lot about, as we've grown at Slack, we've brought on a value consulting team, we've brought on a demo engineering team, and it continues to grow. And a lot of times the conversation is, where does that team sit, right? Especially for security, we handle security. Do they sit under the risk and compliance team, or are they under pre-sales? So that's a great point, Joe. So we've talked a little bit about enablement from a program sense, but we have about 100 plus very high performing SEs and aspiring SEs on the line here. So maybe just to talk a little bit about individuals and SEs and some of the qualities. I think a question always comes up, and I think you all have a really interesting perspective around, what makes a rock star SE, right? What is it that they do that really just sets them apart? We've talked about the metrics and the enablement, but from a personal standpoint, what are some of those traits that you've seen that have really helped people kind of rise above within the organizations that you guys oversee?
I'm glad to kick this one off. I would say for myself, it's natural curiosity. It's the type of person who, sits there and finds something on their desk, and the first thing they want to do is take it apart and put it back together. And I think then you go from that, and I always look at kind of the SE skill set as 3 legs of a stool, where you have, product expertise, knowing your company's products, at an extremely detailed level. Industry and domain expertise. What is it your customers do, and why is it important to them? And then the third leg of the stool is the performance art of what we do. How do you connect with an audience, hold an audience, deliver a message, and make sure they remember you at the end of the day after they've sat through 3 weeks of scripted demos. So that's my short take.
Yeah, no, I like that, Joe. And I just want to add, we talk a lot about at Splunk having a growth mindset, which really kind of falls into, taking that initiative, whether it's taking something apart, like you mentioned, or saying, hey, how can I better myself? Where do I want to go? How am I going to get there? What partnerships and relationships do I need to form? I think at the end of the day, when you have all of those pieces, you can get that knowledge and training, but really having that motivation and being able to inspire yourself and others, I think that definitely will take you a long way, and it's easily recognizable.
The only line I'll add to that I've shared with some of the Cs is that I like individuals that will be willing to take the approach of, I'll ask for forgiveness and ask for permission. It demonstrates that they're willing to take initiative, do things on their own, and have the natural curiosity that both Joe and Teresa talked about.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Also, thank you, Sales Engineers of Toronto, for that question that came in from them. I think we have time for about one more, and then we're going to jump into some questions from some of the attendees here. So, the last question from me is before we get into the lightning round, we still have the lightning round. The last question from me before that is, you guys have been in this role, you've been successful. I've enjoyed learning a lot about what you've accomplished for your organizations. you know, if you look back at your time in the role, or maybe it's even a previous role that you had at a company that was similar, what was the one thing that you did and you contributed to that you look back and you're most proud of?
So I'll take a stab here. I had an opportunity at Workday to build our new grads, you know, next generation talent dev program. And that was a brutal amount of hard work, but without a doubt, the most rewarding thing I've done in my career. And then, you know, to see those people that were graduates of the program now, you know, 5, 6 years later, be leaders of the company is awesome.
I'll go ahead and jump in if Marjorie, unless you want to go first.
Go for it.
Okay. I actually would like to pick one from my previous experience in nonprofit, just because it was very rewarding. I had the opportunity to work with Engineers Without Borders and create a program for educators to go to third world countries. And we had a couple different areas that they would go to. So if, for example, you know, they would learn the engineering process, they would be able to participate in what Engineers Without Borders was doing, take this knowledge back and then transfer it down. And so building that entire program, the operation behind it, and then being able to measure the success. And really at the end of the day, I think the best part was being able to go and see that message delivered to you know, K-12 and seeing the look in their eyes saying, hey, I can relate to that and I can do that. And that might be my next step. I think that was absolutely the most rewarding project I've ever worked on.
And to keep up the trend of education of the younger generation, so not at VMware, but at Symantec, we had launched an initiative to target younger students as well. Particularly, we were looking at STEM, targeting young girls in grades 7th to 11th grade. And that was hugely rewarding as well. I think the notion of us, when we're looking at driving diversity within our companies, you know, we're like, oh, well, the pipeline's thin. Well, actually, we need to start younger, right? If we truly want to build up the next generation of talent, we need to make sure that we continue going further back. And so 7th to 11th grade, we did a ton of fun exercises around fishing and whatnot. But the most rewarding part of it for me was used to do this in Silicon Valley. And it's interesting. You'd find young girls would say, oh, well, my parents are both developers. That's so boring. I don't want to be a developer. And I would have the opportunity to stand in the room and say, well, you don't have to be a developer if you go into tech. And I would talk to them about the SE role. And for them, it was like, oh my God, I get to go out and have fun and meet new people. Like, well, this is just amazing. So that I think is great. I think it's important for us, all of us, to look at the communities that we're a part of and see how we can contribute back to the younger generations and demonstrate to them how fun this job is, how fun, you know, our organizations can be, and how important it's going to be for them to continue down the technology path.
All right. Do we have time for audience questions here, guys? People are they're fighting each other with who's. All right. So Simran Ahuja has 9 likes, and I'm going to read her comment. Coming up on my 1 year as an SE, what advice would you give to someone who is in their early SE career, or something you wished you would have done early on? Thank you, Simran.
Say simple one is the person that dies with the most product knowledge wins. Keep at it.
I would say, just to add to the knowledge piece, but network, right? I joke about stumbling upon things, but it's really not been stumbling. I've had great sponsors and mentors who have always thought about, hey, what about this for you? So build your network, connect, demonstrate to folks what you know, and express your interest. No one's going to know what you want to do next unless you tell people. So build that network and let people know what's next for you so they can help you find it.
Right. I would add on to that. I love that. And one of the things that we're doing is we're actually trying to create a program around job rotation. I think that cross-functional piece is really important. So I think it's really easy to stay in our own silo. So being able to reach out to different you know, theaters or geographic locations or different SEs, but even just product, you know, customer success, being able to form that network, like you had mentioned, I think is a fantastic next step.
Thank you, everyone. The next question has 5 likes. Thank you, Kevin Jacobs, for asking that. And I'm going to read it now. From a change management perspective, I'm curious how, after an acquisition, you approach ramping up SEs on new technologies. Do you focus on speed, expertise, having employees from the acquired company do the training? What do you think the best practices are here?
That is an excellent question. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we've done this one too many times. I feel like I've got too much experience in it. So we do a couple of things, right? So VMware, while we have certain components of security, and I'll talk specifically of the security aspects, I can give you a good example. We have certain aspects of security, but you don't have folks here who have, your hardcore CISSP backgrounds, right? No one who has understood really what our threat vectors are, or even know what that terminology is. And having come from Symantec, me and the leader actually that I was supporting at the time, we both came from Symantec and we had a pretty heavy security background. So we have a very strong opinion of what some of the foundational things were required. But our Carbon Black peers who we had acquired also had a pretty strong opinion. So we did 2 things. One, we hired external third party to help kind of build that foundational level. We actually started with getting some folks through CISSP training and getting them certified before the security acquisition. It wasn't anything that we knew. We just had a feeling that this was coming. So let's start getting folks in that path. That was number 1. Number 2, once Carbon Black was actually acquired, we had folks from their organization train our SEs again on some of the foundational security terminology. We didn't even focus on product, right? Because again, completely different vertical of solutions that they needed to learn. So we had them focus on what does security actually mean? What do our customers care about? Where are the buying centers? And once that was done, then the SE started learning the product. And yeah, it was about speed, right? Because we wanted to help amplify the size of, of the Carbon Black footprint with our core sellers and be able to open up those dialogues. But we didn't accelerate deep product knowledge, more seller product level knowledge. So that we can get folks more acquainted with, opening up those doors and then pulling in the specialist teams when necessary. But we continue that journey and we'll continue building, knowledge for every acquisition. We've been doing something similar along the lines to help the SEs kind of build up that foundation.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that, I think that was an excellent answer. So I think, we, like I said before, we're fortunate to have a team that helps with enablement, but we have a component of our business that we acquired through, was from an acquisition, it was AppDev, part of our business. And we still struggle with the integration of that in the sense that it's not seamless, right? So an SE could be working with a customer and they have the need for that component of the business. And it's, I'm going to pull this person in instead of really thinking about it from a high level of, hey, I'm talking to a customer and this, and this could fit for what they're looking for. So I think that that training becomes really important, but I think use cases are important. I think that demonstration of customer success is really important. So to be able to hold that up, and especially when you're working cross-functionally, and SE does pull in somebody that's got the security expertise or the app dev expertise and really hold that up and say, hey, this is what great looks like. I think that's some of the things that we've been doing and developing, and it's pushing us in the right direction. Absolutely.
Perfect. I have a last question. Thank you, Teresa, Marjorie, for that. Last question is from Shamil Turner. He has 4 likes on this question. And it goes, what is the right size of a solutions org when a chief of staff makes sense? A 10-person SA team doesn't make that much sense. Would you agree?
Yeah, I just, I'll say from previous experience, let's say we were probably about 60 people globally at Workday when we built the function. And as I said earlier, Workday always was not shy about investing in stuff like this. So, and that might be a bit of an outlier. I'm the first enroll at Okta. We were probably 160 people or so when I joined Okta, to give you the other end of the spectrum.
Perfect. Teresa, Marjorie, anything to add?
Yeah,
no.
so
go ahead, Marjorie.
So I was gonna say, so I supported 900 people in the organization across our core and specialist sellers, but I actually work with some folks at Dell, one of our parent company, and they are actually one of the teams that supports one of our solutions, VxRail. their team is only 16 people and they have a chief of staff on the team. So I've seen it go, you know, from either a super large size or a super small size. I think it really depends on the need of the business, how much reporting is important to that business, how much operationalizing. So if you think about the VxRail, it's a hardware business. So a lot of it is required on tracking, logistics, you know, getting things to the customer, making sure that they're actually getting the hardware there. So I think it varies on really what you're looking to accomplish and the function that that person's truly going to fill. Because I'll tell you, many of the chief of staff that I've met, similar to you're seeing here in the panel, we're all very different in background and experience, similar to all the folks that I've met. And we're also very different in probably what we did on a day-to-day basis, right? So it depends on what you're looking for is really the answer. And I know that that's a consulting answer, but it depends.
All right, so we have one more. We have time for one more. Thank you to my friend and colleague, Anthony Westmoreland, for a wonderful question that all of us actually are curious about. How do you handle conflict between SEs and AEs, and how do you deliver negative feedback?
Actually, I can take that question. That comes up a lot as far as, especially the latter, how do you deliver negative feedback, or what I like to say is just difficult feedback, or even a difficult message. So one of the things that I work with the leadership team on is there is a way to deliver depending on your team. I like to use the example of one of the tools that we use here is called the color code, if you've heard of it. And it's not in any way, shape, or form to say, you know, this person has this type of personality, but there is something to be said about how you deliver a message to a particular person. For example, one of the colors might be red. You guys probably know somebody who is red. They are, give me the facts, make it quick. Don't give me additional details I don't need, because I don't want to hear them. So when you deliver that message, that's how you deliver it. When you're talking to somebody else, it may be, hey, I need you to deliver it in this way, non-confrontational. I care about forming relationships. So I think delivering those negative messages really entails that you understand your audience and you really understand what motivates them in order to deliver those difficult messages.
I think that was brilliant.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys again so much for all the questions that came in. Those were great, better than the ones that myself and the SENY founders came up with. So it's power to the community. So we have one last thing that we're going to do before we jump into the raffle. And this is the world famous lightning round. Okay. So this is, I think, the second time we've done it, but it's becoming world famous. And so we'll go around the horn and we'll keep the same order too. Maybe on my screen, we're going clockwise. So Teresa, Marjorie, and then Joe. So we'll go through 4 questions here. So the first question is, what is your favorite app on your phone?
Instacart, hands down.
Oh my God, I love it. I don't need to look, yes.
Unfortunately, United Airlines, I wake up every morning and wonder when my next flight is.
You'll be waiting a little longer, I think. Next question, what was the last book that you read?
So mine was Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office by Louis Frankel. It's a great book on changing the way that we see gender in the workplace, some of the things that we do and don't, and we should do and what we shouldn't do. I don't necessarily buy into all of it, but it was a good read.
Mine was the first 90 days because I took on a new role and wanted to make sure I was doing the right thing.
For me, it was Countdown 1945, the new Chris Wallace book. Just read it last week just because I'm a nerd and interested in history.
Perfect. We'll go to the opposite end of the media spectrum. The last Netflix or online show that you binge watched?
Billions.
The Walking Dead. I don't know why. I just, you know what? I've been locked up. I'm like, I want to fear the world for a reason. So let's watch The Walking Dead so I can fear the world for a reason.
It was Breaking Bad, and that took up 2 weeks of April, which was awesome.
Perfect. 3 good ones. Last question, I'm going to reframe it a little bit. So it usually is, what's your favorite country to visit? But we've been stuck inside for a while. What will your next trip be once you're able to get out of your local geo?
I want to go to Paris.
I was just going to say the diner. I miss the diner. I don't even need to leave and go anywhere. I just want to go to the diner. And for those that are from Jersey, you know why we love diners. And I live close to the Tops Diner, which is the best diner ever. So
For me, it's Vietnam. I have this trip booked in the fall, so we'll see if it comes to pass or not.
Very cool. Well, Marjorie, I can appreciate that. I'm originally from New Jersey and spent a lot of time in diners, so I would love to get there as well. But so that is a wrap for all the questions that we had. I really, again, want to sincerely thank you guys, Teresa, Marjorie, Joe. Thank you guys so much for all of the time and effort that you put into it, beyond just the hour plus that we spent here. I know there's some prep time and some calls that we got on, and we just really appreciate your guys' support and you guys coming out and being a part of this. I know the conversation was great. I took a lot out of it. Based on the Slack chat and some of the comments, it seems like the rest of the team did too. So again, just really, really appreciate all of your guys' support.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Super
this
fun.
was great. Yeah, thanks for a great conversation.
Perfect. So now the moment that the folks who have stuck around have been waiting for, we're going to raffle off some gifts. So Akshat, if you want to come back on, we'll go ahead and give away some prizes.
All right. So before I can do that, I want to ask and request the panelists to pick one question, and the lucky winner gets a Sonos One shipped to them, thanks to Matt Darrow from Vivint. Thank you, Matt. So whoever wants to pick a winner for the best question.
You know,
I don't think we want that pressure.
Yeah, actually, you know, I will say that I think the question that I really appreciated the most, which was the last question, as far as how do you deliver a difficult message or how do you deliver negative feedback? I think that's an important question, and people don't ask that, but that would be that's my vote.
All right. Everyone agrees?
It's a winner.
Anthony, you are getting a Sonos One shipped to you. Thank you for asking that. All right, and I guess we are good for the next two. The other things I want to announce are the winners for a t-shirt for the most likes on a question. And that goes to G1 with 6 likes on your question. Congrats, G1, you'll be getting a t-shirt shipped to you. And the likes for most most likes for a comment, not a question. And that award goes to Joshua. Joshua, you are the winner for your Bill Hayes comment, which you made. A lot of people love that. So thank you for the comment. Yeah. So I think I'm ready to do that. Okay, cool.
Perfect, Josh. Is this when we spin the wheel to see the random winners?
Let's just, okay, you know what? I can do that. And I want to announce the next event, or should we do that? I'll do that after, no worries. So I am going to share my screen. And let me know when everyone can see it.
All right, I can see it, and I can hear your trance music playing.
This is very sophisticated.
So the rules are this. None of the founders for any chapters can claim the prize, and you have to message us live on Slack to claim the prize. If you're not here, you don't get the prize. We spin the wheel again. And if you have won it in the past, you're not gonna get the prize. We want new people to get this, all right? Those are the rules. So let's start.
I can't get no sleep.
I love it.
Hey.
Is Brett online? I'm gonna wait until somebody claims the prize. All right. There is no Brett. I'm going to remove him. Spin the wheel again. Good. All right. So do we have Abdullah on? Going 1, 2, 3. Nope. Again.
Oh man. Keep going.
All right, Stanley. Come on. I think Stanley is here.
He's here. He's here. Perfect.
Oh yeah, he said thank you, thank you.
He is here. Congratulations, Stanley. All right, last one, right, Akshat?
Action's just going on in this party.
Yeah, he hears nothing right now. Christian. Christian Roz.
There's a conspiracy theory that Akshat has a bunch of phony names in here to extend his DJ playing skill set.
All right, how about Gaurav Sharma? It doesn't look like it. You may just need to go to the second best question. Arthur Bowie. No? No, Akshat? Akshat, I think we need a new list for next time. How do we just get the Zoom participants next time?
Some folks want you to put up the sound a little bit louder, Akshat, for the music.
Kevin Jacobs. Let's see.
Oh, we got
He's
it.
here.
Oh, he's here.
Everyone, and I hope you all enjoyed. Before we, end this, I want to thank everyone, all the panelists, and we do want to announce the next event. We're gonna take a break for the summer. We want to.
Akshat, I don't know if everyone can hear you. Can you guys hear him?
Yeah,
I can't
I
hear
don't
him.
think so.
No.
Owen, why don't we kick it to you? Why don't you announce your event?
I was gonna say, well, yeah, we're gonna be taking it off for the summer, and then what happens in September? we're going back to school, people, with SENY. So this is going to be a really interesting panelist. We're going to have people that have ran large organizations for enablement, companies that actually build enablement platforms they sell to companies, and it's going to all be about continuous learning. So enjoy your summer off. You know, we can finally go outside a little bit, so let's go get some fresh air, and then we'll see you guys back for the school year. So we're excited for our next event.
Awesome.
Right.
Well, thank you guys so much. That concludes our third ever virtual meetup. Thanks again, Teresa, Marjorie, and Joe. Thanks, Akshat, for the impromptu DJ set. I don't know if people want to stay on, maybe Akshat will keep the tunes going, but for everyone else, enjoy the rest of your night. And again, thank you guys so much.
Guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Take care.